What is going on, guys? Today we're going to talk about a stock that I personally own and that I've talked about a couple times on the channel, and they recently announced earnings, and that is SoFi Technologies. So we're going to take a look at where the stock price is at, where it's kind of gone over the last few months. I mean, obviously, just like the rest of the stock market, it's down, but we're going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about what kind of was released during earnings and my feel towards kind of how that actually looks going forward, and then how the market's kind of digested it most recently. So we'll take a look at all that. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like down below. And if you want to see more videos like this one, make sure you hit that sub button. First thing up here for SoFi Technologies is we're going to take a look at the stock chart and what it looks like compared to a lot of the rest of the market. And it is not good. It is not good at all. Today it was actually relatively good. They were up 4.57%. But overall, they've been having just an absolutely terrible time. So just in the last 5 days, they're down 22%. In the last month, down 26%. So obviously, you know, they announced earnings and overall the stock just reacted very poorly to it. But the market's also been incredibly weak recently, and we've just seen that affect the stock price as well. So overall, in the last 6 months, they're down 75.88%. And then if we look at the yearly chart, we can kind of see how things have been playing out. They've been struggling over the last year. At first, you know, back in kind of this time frame down here in December, November, they were kind of experiencing what looked to be more of a normal pullback. So I've kind of talked about this a couple times on the channel, but overall they seem to run down and then have this run up into the $22 kind of range, and then pull back down into this $14, $15 range, and then run back up into this $22 range. So we saw that trend, but recently obviously that trend broke, and it looked like they were turning around kind of in here at the end of December, and things were gonna start continuing, or actually turn around and go back up for the stock, and maybe, you know, reach back into these $22 marks. But overall the market just was way too weak, and things just fell through the floor. I mean, with obviously the Russia-Ukraine situation, interest rates, everything. So we've seen the stock kind of just tumble and keep on tumbling, and it has just been absolutely brutal for this stock. So I do still hold and own shares. I think I own like somewhere around like 300 shares of this stock. So at varying cost bases, I've kind of sold puts beneath it along the way down, and let some exercise, and some I've continued to roll out. So overall, happy with the stock. I think there's a lot of upside potential, so I'm not too worried. And honestly, the earnings that we're going to take a look at here, they don't worry me at all. So let's jump into some of those earnings and what we've seen. So first, we'll take a real quick look at just what's reported on Google. Some of these numbers, you know, they vary just based off site to site, but Google has them expected for $283.99 million dollars in revenue for the quarter. They actually came in at $321.73 million dollars in revenue for the quarter, and that was a 13% beat. So that was huge. For some reason, they don't have the expected EPS. We'll jump into it here in a second, but the number that I'm seeing most common is negative around 14 cents, with it actually expected of negative 15 cents. So for this, if it was negative 14 cents, then obviously they'd have a small surprise miss. But if the expected was where I'm seeing most of the numbers come in at 15, then they'd have a small expected beat. But either way, they're basically right there in the ballpark for their EPS and the revenue. There was one huge, really bad thing that kind of happened that I'm sure you've heard about if you're a SoFi stockholder. And basically what happened is they actually pre-released their earnings on complete accident. And they even say here, so the company said that the report was released early due to human error. So someone accidentally released their numbers. They were supposed to release after market close on Tuesday, and ended up actually releasing basically, I think it was either pre-market or very early in the day on Tuesday. And it was a complete accident. And with the way the market is right now, anything like this is going to send the stock tumbling. So the stock actually went down, and it was down more than 18% before it was halted around 11:20 a.m. Eastern time. And then basically after it resumed, it was halted for over 3 hours, which is kind of crazy. And basically once it resumed, the stock kind of actually bounced back up, kind of actually digested the earnings and took them for what it was. But anything like that where the market, releases, early releases, we saw it with, I think, TTCF, Tattooed Chef, where they actually delayed their release because they weren't ready to release numbers, and that stock went tumbling down. That was a while back, but right now the market, just with how risk off everything is, it's just going to react negatively to any sort of news like that. So here we can see kind of what they reported. So SoFi reported a loss of 14 cents. Again, this is kind of where I got that number from, so 14 cents. And then they have expected on here a loss of 15 cents, which is kind of in that ballpark with where Google was at. Here's the kind of big thing. So they actually reported a beat on revenue, as we saw, reporting 322 million versus an estimate of 286 million. And then the last thing kind of up here is another kind of bad thing. So the market is solely focused on the bad right now, as you can kind of see from how the market just is and everything going down. But they actually said that their Q2 revenue, they're expecting to be between 330 million to 340 million, and supposedly analysts were looking for 343.7 million from SoFi. So this is kind of interesting because SoFi's CEO, Anthony Nadeau, who's a very interesting guy, spent time at Goldman Sachs and at Twitter, but he kind of believes that these numbers, or this number, this 343 million, is actually Wall Street not updating their expectations, because SoFi actually had a press release earlier in the year where they basically said that the memorandum, the student loan memorandum, because that wasn't going to be, because that wasn't removed, and student loans weren't requesting to be repaid by the government. Basically, they changed their yearly revenue estimates, and basically Anthony Nadeau doesn't believe that this 343 actually took that into consideration, even though they had that press release months and months ago. So overall, kind of interesting there. Doesn't really matter. Overall, it's kind of the market, again, reacting very poorly to what's still good news. I mean, you're looking at a revenue expectation that's maybe a miss by $3 million, which that's if they miss. So if they beat, is Wall Street is the market going to react to the upside? It all just depends on the overall sentiment. So overall, nothing really concerning there. Let's jump into a little bit more of the finer details for these earnings. The first thing up here is by far, in my opinion, the most important metric to look at when you're looking at a company like SoFi. And basically what we're looking at is members and products. Specifically, I'd like to focus on members. So these numbers are obviously in the thousands, so we're talking about much higher numbers than 3,800 people. But what's very, very interesting and very good to look at and see is here we have Q1 of 2021. And of 2021, they had basically 2,281 thousand members. And now in Q1 of 2022, they're looking at almost double that number. So they have 3,868,000 members. And that's in a matter of a year. Basically, they've almost doubled that number. So that is insane. That's awesome to see. And then what's also important is, their members that they do have, they're using more and more of their products. So once they get in the SoFi ecosystem, they're using more and more products. So overall, looking at these numbers and looking at these increases, you see a company that seems to be headed in the right direction. There's nothing that really it's not like we saw a giant loss or drop in these numbers. And it's also another thing to consider that this isn't a time when, banks and everything, they're kind of on edge. People aren't sure what interest rates and what's going to happen with, the overall market there. So it's very interesting that they've still managed to be able to grow their user base. And then in here there's a bunch of details in this article about basically the conference call and everything that was announced. The biggest ones that I wanted to point out here are basically their financial services segment and then their lending products. So lending products, they saw a rise of 20% year over year, and that's still up from the fourth quarter of 18% annual growth, and that's their fourth straight quarter of year over year growth. So that's huge, especially again that they're seeing growth in time period when rates and everything are increasing. So people are still taking loans, and they're still taking loans with SoFi. And then again, down here we have basically their lending segment. So it's contributing more to their profit as well. So they saw their profit from their lending segment up to 133 million, and that's up 51% from 87.7 million. So that's huge. So basically the loans that they are getting, they're more profitable than before as well. So overall positive there. This is the huge one though that I see being basically the biggest thing for SoFi in the long run, and that's SoFi basically money management. So they're starting their rollout of checking and savings accounts. They just got the bank charter maybe 6 to 8 months ago, and they're finally starting to roll that out and really get users in, and it's very interesting. So the total product increase has which is basically the usage of products by SoFi users, they've seen that increase by over 100% year over year. So that's huge, and that again basically goes back to the fact that people who get into the SoFi ecosystem basically start using more and more and more of their products. So SoFi checking and savings accounts, I mean, that'll be huge for SoFi in the long run, to basically get people into their ecosystem and hold them there and create a lot of longevity with this type of platform. So overall huge. There's a lot of good things in this article. I mean, every number that you look at across the board basically is just them increasing user growth, increasing the amount of money that they're making off of lending, whatever it may be. Overall, I mean, there's just a lot of good information here and a lot of good things for the business. So in my opinion, at the end of the day, we're in just a very negative market. The market is looking at things and they're seeing things, they're seeing what they want to see. And basically what they want to see right now is that all these companies, these fintechs and just tech in general, they're seeing them, and there's been a lot of comparisons recently to the tech bubble, and it's just so kind of out there. I think there's a lot of people, they're still trying to price in, inflation and rate increases and what's the possibility of a recession and whatnot. But we haven't seen the metrics decrease like actually affecting businesses and affecting them at least in a major way where you'd have a very high concern of recession. I mean, people are still spending money. You're still seeing money velocity where money's changing hands all the time. There's a lot of good metrics out there that spending is still there. So overall, I think the market's just beaten down on this stock. I personally love it. I think there's a lot of upside to it. And I think getting it at a $5 to $6 price range is huge, because I easily could see the stock going up into the $20 range where it's been at before. So if that were to happen, I mean, you've got a potential 4x of your money. So I personally am still invested. I'm actually buying more. I just recently will buy more. I have a put that I sold on Monday that will probably expire in the money when the market fell because of the pre-release on earnings. Basically it pushed my put into the money, and I'm happy to purchase more shares. And honestly, if the stock kind of stays around where it's at right now, I might continue to sell some puts. I'm actually thinking about taking some of my put spreads that are on SPY off, that are out of the money, and potentially converting that into selling puts against SoFi and some of these other companies that are down massively. So overall, really interested in SoFi, but I'm also interested in kind of hearing your thoughts and comments on the company. So leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think about SoFi. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts and opinions. If you like the video, make sure you drop a like down below. And if you want to see more videos like this one, make sure you hit that sub button. Otherwise, as always, have a wonderful rest of your day.